In this tutorial, we will be discussing molecular compounds and how to name them. Molecular compounds are compounds formed from two or more nonmetals. The basic unit of a molecular compound are molecules composed of constituent atoms. Ionic compounds contain one or more cations paired with one or more anions, which have a positive and a negative charge associated with them. The basic units that compose dry ice is a molecular compound, CO2, carbon dioxide. These are molecules. Notice there's a distinct beginning and ending of it. The basic units that compose table salt, an ionic compound, are NaCl formula units. Notice there is no stopping and starting here. It just keeps going on and on and on until the ions run out. Chemists have developed a systematic way to name compounds. If you learn the naming rules, you can examine the compound's formula and determine its name and vice versa. Many compounds also have common names. For instance, H2O has a common name of water. However, the systematic name is dihydrogen monoxide. Di because there's two hydrogens, and mono because there's only one oxygen. Since water is such a familiar compound, however, everyone uses the common name and not a systematic name. Common names can be learned only through familiarity. In other words, you have to memorize it. There is no system. The first step in naming a molecular compound is to identify that you have one. So we have a stair-step line here. On the left, you have metals, and on the right, you have nonmetals. Nearly all molecular compounds have formed from two or more nonmetals. So both of the atoms are going to be on the right-hand side of the periodic table because they're both nonmetals. We learned how to name binary, meaning two-element molecular compounds. Their names have the same form each time. The name of the first element with the prefix of how many there are, and the base of the second element with the prefix on how many there are, and ending in "ide." So fluorine becomes fluoride, hydrogen becomes hydride. When they refer to the base, they're typically referring to the first syllable. When writing the name of the molecular compound, as when writing the formula, the first element is the more metal-like one. The prefixes given to each element indicate the number of atoms present. So here we have N2H6. That 2 means di. So di for the prefix. N is for nitrogen. 6 is hexa. Then hydrogen becomes hydride. Before we even get to this point, what I should have done first is confirm that here's nitrogen, here's hydrogen, that both elements were nonmetals. Even though hydrogen's over here, it's the only nonmetal that's on the left-hand side. P2Cl5. P is here, Cl is here. They're both nonmetals. So 2 is for di, so di, P is phosphorus. Cl5, 5 is penta. And Cl is chlorine, which then becomes chloride because you take the base of the word, which is typically the first syllable. If there's only one atom of the first element, the prefix mono is normally omitted. So in other words, it's not monocarbon dioxide, it's just carbon dioxide. The compound N2O, also called laughing gas, is named according to the first element, nitrogen, with the prefix di, followed by the base of the second one, which is ox, with the prefix mono and suffix ide. So monoxide. Since mono ends in a vowel and oxide begins with a vowel, an O is dropped and the two combine to be monoxide. Monoxide. The entire name is dinitrogen monoxide. When the prefix ends in a vowel and the base name starts with a vowel, the first vowel is sometimes dropped. Note the word sometimes, as in monoxide. However, for instance, triiodide, both I's are left in there. So let's take a look at these. BrO3. Br is right here, is bromine, and oxygen is right here. They're both nonmetals, so I'm going to use the prefixes. It's a 1, but we don't use 1 for naming, so it's just plain bromine for the first element. So bromine. 3 is tri. The base of oxygen is ox. And then the ending is ide. Notice once again with the I, we kept both vowels there. So bromine trioxide. The next one, boron and nitrogen. Once again, they're both nonmetals. So that means that we're going to use the prefixes. The first one is only 1. We do not use mono for the first element. We only use it for the second one. So boron, mono for 1 for the nitrogen, nitro, the first syllabus for the first syllable for the nitrogen, ending in ide. So mononitride. The next one, nitrogen and oxygen, both nonmetals, so we use the prefixes. 2 is di, so dinitrogen. 3 oxygen, so 3. Oxygen is ox, and an ending in ide. Trioxide. N and I, both nonmetals, so we use prefixes. Mono for the first one, but we don't use mono, so just plain nitrogen. 3 for tri. Iod for the iodine, and it ends in iodide. Nitrogen triiodide. Sulfur and fluorine. Sulfur, I leave off the mono for the first element. 6 is hexa, and then fluoride. Fluorine becomes fluoride. Next one, xenon and fluorine. 4 is tetra, so tetrafluoride. Let's see if we can reverse this process and go from the name to the symbols. Sulfur, and we look at the middle of the word to figure out what element it is. So sulfur and oxygen, because oxide came from oxygen. So S and O. There's no prefix for the sulfur, so that means it's a 1. And then di is for 2, so it's SO2. You don't have to write the 1. Bromine. Fluoride came from fluorine. There's no prefix, so that's a 1. Penta means 5, so BrF5. Disulfur, so we have sulfur. Dichloride, we have chlorine. Di and disulfur means 2. Dichloride means 2. One of the big differences between molecular and ionic, when you have the prefixes written there, when you have it molecular, you do not reduce it. So I'm just going to leave these as 2 and 2. I'm not going to reduce it down to 1 and 1, because that would be wrong. So the answer is S2Cl2. Boron trifluoride. So boron, there's no prefix there, so it's going to be left alone. Trifluoride. Fluoride is fluorine. Tri is 3. tetraarsenic. AS for decoxide. Notice that they left out the A there. Instead of decaoxide, it's just decoxide. O10 for deca. Silicon, tetrachloride. Chlorine, tetra is 4. And that's all there is to it. The molecular ones are actually far easier than the ionic. So what did we go over today? The molecular compounds are nonmetals only, which means that they're going to be on the right-hand side of the periodic table. You have the element and then the prefix. Unless that first prefix is a mono, then you leave it off. And then the second one is the base of the element, the first syllable, followed by I. So instead of chlorine, it's then chloride. Instead of fluorine, it's fluoride. And you have the prefix in front of that as well for the number there are. And then you do use mono. Mono's for the second element. It's not for the first element.